There's a magazine called Forbes ASAP. They have out now something called The Big Issue, 53 seers and sages on the techno future. None more sagacious than Tom Wolfe, and I'm pleased to have him here to talk about what he writes about in this 53 very distinguished people, many of them who've been on this broadcast, talking about the future. Here is what it looks like with Mr. Wolfe. Sorry, but your soul just died. What does that mean?
What it really means, Charlie, is that people are now so enthralled with the idea of genetic determinism.
Right.
I'll give you some examples. You can just watch television, pick up a magazine, and here's the kind of things you're going to learn. That your happiness is genetically set.
Right.
And it doesn't matter about your triumphs or failures in love or careers or commerce or anything else. You're quickly going to go back to the genetically set happiness level that you're at. Also, if you are a man, you are genetically hardwired
the word you use in this teeth.
to be polygamous.
Right.
So if your wife objects, you say, look, honey, a couple of 100 million years of evolution, what chance do I have?
Or my genes made me do it.
Now, I don't want to get you in trouble, but there's also the theory that women lust for celebrities because they figure a celebrity is going to, instinctively, this is hardwired, this is not thinking, that the celebrity is going to be in a position to guard the offspring of the woman. And this is part of the
So the turn on of celebrities is they'll take care.
Somehow they'll take care of you, and so that's and so she says, well, honey, I'm just a lifeguard in the gene pool.
Intelligence. Speak to intelligence because that's central to this.
This is the hottest subject going right now, and it is a hot button subject, and it's very radioactive. The book that came out recently, The Bell Curve, Charles Murray, Richard Herrnstein, is just the beginning of the ruckus that the idea of hardwired IQ is creating. Now, recently, and this really intrigues me, recently, a company called Neurometrics was formed or attempted to get rolling. They had come up with an IQ cap. Now, I have talked to a researcher who has used this, and it works. Instead of sitting down for 2 hours and taking an IQ test, and paying for someone to prepare the test, someone to grade the test, somebody to monitor the test, somebody to pay the rent while you waste all this time, you can put 16 electrodes on your head. Somebody has put it on you. You don't have to shave the head. You don't have to cut any hair. You must it up a little bit, but you put them on there. You have the person stare at a point on the wall. And this researcher I talked to used a raspberry red thumbtack. And if the subject will stare for 16 seconds, at that point on the wall, the brain waves are recorded, and the tester can predict within half an interval of accuracy, which is very, very, very close to full accuracy. Not only the score that you're going to get on the IQ test when you take it for 2 hours, but also each of the 11 subtests that the conventional IQ test has. Now, the people backing this thing thought they were going to make a fortune, because the saving just in money alone was enormous, but nobody wants it. It's too frightening. I mean, I don't want to know my IQ,
no.
And if I get 110 on my IQ test, I want to believe that it was because I wasn't feeling very well that day.
It was a bad day.
It was a bad day.
All right, let me double back. You start off by saying Louis Rossetto, who is the editor of Wired magazine, gives a lecture at the Cato Institute. And he's talking about the digital revolution and how it is going to be everything. And he even quotes the great, who was a Jesuit?
Pierre Tyler de Chardin.
And talking about this, sheen of what is sort of
Tyler thought that there was going to be, that computers, television especially, would form what he called a noosphere, which would be a nervous system that would reach around, it would cover the entire Earth and bind all human beings together. And what Rossetto is saying is that time has arrived. The Internet is really doing that.
But you step forward to say there's something much more exciting than all of that information explosion brought to us by the connection of the Internet. And it is about the brain. And it is about understanding, what you just described, how the brain works, and to figure out by imaging what it dictates about the future.
Cyberspace is going to look like nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to brain imaging, which is just getting off the ground. Right now, there's just a few places, mostly in America, and oddly enough, Havana, but we can get into that later, that are capable of, that are coming up with these new things. One that's well known already is the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. Well, there's a functional MRI now that can tell you how the blood is flowing in the brain. There are PET scans, positron emission tomography.
Right.
And then there's a new thing called the PET scan reporter probe reporter gene, which can actually, you can actually see genes light up inside the brain on a screen. And then there's very sophisticated electroencephalography, the old EEG, but it's now used three-dimensionally. You can follow brain activity, almost like a live movie.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What this means is that I think within 10 years, these things will have become so sophisticated that they will prove what neuroscientists have been saying now for the last 25 years, which is that there is no self. There isn't a little ghost inside of us that's running the show. There's just a mechanism. The brain is a mechanism. It's an analog chemical computer. Yeah. And I'm saying that once people are convinced of this, and they're being convinced of it very rapidly through television, magazines, and whatnot, it's going to, despite the fact that it's exciting stuff, it's going to depress people. Because, I'm going to say, my IQ is 110, there's nothing I can do about it.
And I know I'm going to have this disease and that disease, and this is what I'm going to look like, and this is all of that.
Exactly. And then there's a study that came out recently that says that the way we judge the beauty or handsomeness of another human being has nothing to do with the life we've led or the society around us. It's hardwired. It has certain symmetrical features, a certain set of the eyes and the jaws. We inherit all of this. These are the theories, and the importance is the people are believing.
And the notion is that when you were born, rather than being a blank page to write on,
exactly,
it is already pre-described in your genetic code.
Go ahead. We can sum this up very easily. The new Darwin, and there is a new Charles Darwin for our century.
Right.
His name is Edward O. Wilson.
Right.
He's a professor of zoology at Harvard. He's written 2 very influential books, The Insect Societies.
Been on this show a number of times.
Oh, has he? I didn't.
Yeah. And he's won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for writing.
Right. Well, now he was kind enough in an interview with Robert Restak, who is a prominent in this field also,
brain expert,
to sum up his whole theory in one sentence. He says every human brain is born not a blank tablet to be filled in by experience, but a negative. It's like a negative in a camera. A negative waiting to be slipped into developer fluid, which means you can develop it well, you can develop it poorly, but all you're going to get is what's on that negative.
Now, what does this do to our friend Charles Darwin?
Well, it's Darwin stepped up really up to another level. It's, Darwin had no opportunity to get into the idea of the question of what is inside the mind and so on. He was talking about the survival of the fittest of humans and others as animals. Now, Darwin's findings had a devastating effect because Darwin, in effect, was saying, and this spread so quickly, that's why we are very foolish to discount what goes on in the intellectual world, very quickly spread the idea that there is no distinction whatsoever between humans and animals. Once people believe that, then they really no longer believe in God. And Nietzsche, who was an atheist, said in the 1880s, a very peaceful time in Europe, he said, this doctrine, which is true but deadly, he said, I believe it, but it's deadly, is going to lead in the 20th century to wars such as have never been waged before. Wars catastrophic beyond all imagining. Now, think of that as a prediction for a second. It made in the 1880s, a peaceful time in Europe, about the 20th century. Then he said, for the 21st, he said, but those wars are going to seem like child's play compared to the total eclipse of all values that's going to occur in the 21st century. And
values are lost because?
Because people believe that they are first animals, and they're just animals competing for survival. Now, I'm saying if this neuroscientific research is misinterpreted, and it is being so widely, it's being disseminated so rapidly and believed in so quickly, then people are going to say, I don't even have a soul to protect me. And I don't have God. I lost God 100 years ago. And now I don't have a self. I don't have a soul. I just have this mechanism. And if brain imaging proves beyond any controversy that, in fact, our brain is a mechanism,
right?
This becomes real dynamite, which is unfortunate because this is exciting stuff. What's going on in neuroscience, but it has to be put in some kind of perspective.
All right. So where does this leave you at the conclusion of this essay and at the conclusion of this investigation by novelist Tom Wolfe?
At the very end, I cite Nietzsche's last prediction, just before he lost his mind to one of the great scourges of the late 19th century. Nietzsche predicted in a note left in his journals, he said, after science has demolished everything else, it'll then turn on itself, and it will devour itself and destroy its own underpinnings. That is already beginning to happen. And it's happening so quickly, it's kind of amusing. 1994, there was a meeting of computer scientists and mathematicians out at Santa Fe Institute. And the subject was the limits of scientific knowledge. They came to the conclusion that after all, the human brain is just a computer. It's an analog chemical computer, and therefore it's finite. It's hardwired through genetic evolution. Therefore, it may be that we're absolutely doomed. We can never understand ourselves. It's as if a group of dogs were to have a convention to try to understand the essence of the dog. Right. So, unfortunately, a dog can make only about 40 forms of communication, all of them primitive, and the quest is impossible. The dog will never understand the dog. So we may be in the same position. And
listen to you in this. If I were a college student today, I don't think I could resist going into neuroscience. Here we have the two most fascinating riddles of the 21st century, the riddle of the human mind and the riddle of what happens to the human mind when it comes to know itself absolutely.
Well, that is the way I feel. I think it's the most exciting thing going on in the academic world today, in the intellectual world today. But I think it has to be, these findings are things that have to be received with caution, and they're not now. The message that's going out is that we're genetically hardwired. There's nothing we can do about it. Therefore, people treat their children that way. Say, oh, you know, my poor son or daughter is hardwired and not very bright. And,
is there a novel here for you?
No, but I would love to write a short book on this subject, because what I'm writing about, I'm not pretending to be a scientist. I'm writing about intellectual history. Mm-hmm. And this is the most important piece of intellectual history in the second half of the 20th century, is the rise of neuroscience and the response of humanity to what neuroscience is telling us.
You have one nose for a story, Mr. Wolfe. This is the last paragraph. I suddenly had a picture of the entire astonishing edifice collapsing and modern man plunging headlong back into the primordial ooze. He's floundering, slushing about, gulping for air, frantically treading ooze, when he feels something huge and smooth swim beneath him and boost him up like some almighty dolphin. He can't see it, but he's much impressed. He names it God. The magazine is Forbes ASAP, a series of articles that captured my attention. Tom Wolfe is just only one. Stephen Ambrose, Tom Brokaw, Bill Buckley, George Gilder, Peter Huber, Bill Gates, Francis Fukuyama, Robert Kaplan, John Keegan, so many more, Ralph Nader. An interesting look at the future. Thank you. You're going to see your daughter's graduation?
Well, it's not graduation. It's just a very important teachers' meeting, and I can't miss it.
Tell her we said we got you there on time. We'll be right back. Stay with us.